So, welcome to this episode of New Narratives. Today we have Nkechi Njaka. She is a practice based creative researcher, a neuroscientist, choreography artist, and mindfulness meditation guide. She's the founder of The Compass, NDN Lifestyle Studio, co founder of the sleep app Dreamwell, and the co host of Dating White, as well as the other half of Resonance. Her work intersects wellness, science, art, and social practice. And today we have the privilege of diving into your own heart relationally and having you share just more about your process and your journey because New Narratives is really about exactly that, creating new narratives about relationships, well being, dating, all the things of the heart. And so, thank you for joining us today to share a little bit more about your journey. So, I would love to just start off by asking, as you're arriving here today with me, what is most alive on your heart in terms of what you're thinking about, holding? What's alive for you?
Mhm. Thank you so much for having me and for holding this conversation. And matters of the heart can be so tender, and I'm feeling that in this moment. I'm arriving with like a pretty tender heart, and also a heart that is soft and open and expanding. And so it's a beautiful day to be having this conversation. And yeah, the practice of relating is one that feels often like actually like the pattern behind me, like very windy and like um it just a lot of fluidity and motion. Um and I think for a long time that movement has felt um like I think it kind of was paired with maybe like some relationship that I was having to anxiety, which is why I sort of got into neuroscience and mindfulness is to sort of help with managing anxiety. But there is this it's yeah, the heart is changing, and how do we hold the varied the very varied variables of it in any moment.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to something really beautiful, which I feel like we talk so much about the brain and the mind and our thinking, but that whole realm of the heart and how it is and how it feels and how it moves and how it relates to life is maybe less familiar and less definitely dialogued about overtly. So I'm glad you're bringing that in. And yeah, just like with that kind of fluidity and windiness, if you were to capture just like what's the aliveness now, like what's, I know you mentioned tenderness. Um, what is on your heart today?
Yeah. Um, a lot is on my heart. I feel like I keep coming back to so there's this bell hooks quote that keeps kind of like swirling in and out of my mind and mind heart space, which is living simply makes loving simple. And that feels true and correct and aligned. However, there is the windy, the variables, the circumstances, the conversations, and things that come up when you're actually in the practice of being in relationship um, that somehow then feel complicated. And I'm right now present to like ways that maybe I need to simplify or um, well, yeah, particularly in conflict, like ways that I can just understand like where is the misalignment or what is the miscommunication, and so that I can be available to loving more simply, um, or being more simple in my loving exchanges. So that's very alive and very present.
I love that. So really honing in on in moments of conflict or difficulty, finding that self alignment to be self loving and loving for the other. Yeah, which is a really natural segue actually into one of my questions around, what we have inherited um, about how relationships should look, how we should be in them, whether that's through friends or culture, family. Like, how is it what you're practicing now at this edge of the heart? How is that um, maybe bumping up against some of what you thought should be or what you had learned should be? How is it different?
Wow. Very, very beautiful question and and also very deep. I I'm currently working with what I would call a pretty harmful story around being chosen. And we might call it, well, the way that I'm working with it is I'm calling it the princess part of me that really inherited all Disney stories around being only valued by who chooses me. And I, it's not even that it's just that I ingested that, then it kind of lived out in these various ways in my life where growing up, I mean, I still am a performance artist, um, but I was on stage a lot, and I, I was a dancer. I am a dancer, but I competed in dance, and I also, yeah, was in plays and performances and various other things, pageants, and a lot, a lot of things culturally that are set up, designed where I'm chosen. Like I'm valued based on if I'm chosen, and it's all really like appearance or based on like some kind of like physicality. And I remember I was just working with this last week, so it's like very, very fresh in heart and mind. But I had auditioned for the play and like the school play, and um, I wanted to be Princess Jasmine. It was Aladdin. I did get the part, and but the guy who got the part of Aladdin was somebody that I had like a real crush on. And then he and the girl who played Jasmine ended up like being a thing afterwards. And so I felt like doubly not chosen. Um, and then this story has like really followed me until like very, very recently. Like I'd say like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. Um, but I've historically chosen partners that don't choose me or can't choose me. And I mean, I even have a podcast about it called Dating. I mean, I had all these theories about why this might be happening, whether it's circumstantial or structurally, or like if we're factoring like white supremacist structure or whatever. Any of these things could be and very likely are playing a role into this very patriarchal and white supremacist idea that I need to be chosen to be valued. But I didn't realize that like I could intellectualize away like a lot of that programming and just be like, well, no, I choose me, and like I'm a choreographer, so I can cast me in a dance, and I can like design my own photo shoots and center myself in my work, and all of that, doing literally everything I could possibly do to undo this like very deep belief. Um, And then last week, I happened to be doing a breathwork exercise, and we were looking at parts, and I decided to just choose that part. It wasn't even like, I mean, there are many, many parts of me that need need to be tended to, but I decided to choose that one, and I didn't realize like how much of it needed to be excavated. And um, I guess to just very simply answer your question, I don't, as much as I don't believe that I have to be chosen to be valued and valuable, um, and I can find my own sovereignty and I can choose myself. there is something really beautiful when I am chosen, like when that is like a very demonstrative thing that a partner or lover or a person who I'm in loving relationship with is making choices to move towards me, be with me, declare their affection and adoration. Like it was like all of it was happening all at once. And I think that it's like something, yeah, being alchemized, that I'm still sort of processing, um, because it did happen, and it did have to happen alongside this like very intentional way of choosing myself, which was that I had this huge production, this huge dance production with an art museum, and there were 10 other dancers and my music partner, and I chose at the very last second to put myself in the piece. Not really understanding that there were going to be so many people. I mean, I knew there was going to be a lot of people there, but I didn't really know the impact. And yeah, this happened while this other relational thing was happening. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that I'm still working really hard for this narrative to give me value. I don't know if that made sense.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just really appreciating the the vulnerability to which you shared, all of the movement in the heart and its, newer like space of working with this from the breath work several weeks ago to like the two simultaneous happenings in the material world right now where you chose yourself and then are working with this notion of feeling chosen or being chosen and loving relationship, and how you've been able to see and connect the dots to, all the way back when in childhood, like really having that get imprinted on the heart of like, I want to be chosen. And it's wild that, you know, it's like I'm never surprised by these things anymore. Like kind of the perfect poetry of how our wounds get get tended to. But the performance of Aladdin and the love relationship that didn't pan out, and then now this performance that you created, that you brought together and then chose to put yourself in that role because that's reparative, because that didn't happen for you and as a kid, and then to have a ripple effect in the loving partnership, it's like, wow, of course, and also wow. That's intense.
It was intense, and it was really, really big. I'm still fully not like, um, it's still really hard to hold all of it. Um, I think that I had, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this and some of the other questions, but I think that I had sort of arranged my life in such a way where I was like, okay, I don't really need that. Like, it's okay if you, um, have other priorities, or or like not even other priorities, but just like aren't prioritizing me or like, and I don't know if that's like a middle child wound. I'm a middle child. I don't know if that's like a wounding from being a middle child, or just like being in partnership with unavailable men, um, and just kind of feeling like that's like baseline, like not how I ought to be treated, but like I'm okay with being treated that way. Um and then kind of being like, oh wait, no, like my Venus is in Leo. Like I want to be claimed. I want to be publicly claimed, and I want to like, be like, yeah, like very, very much chosen, and not just chosen in like a, oh, what are you doing this day? Like, let's hang out that day because I want to see you. But like, yeah, I didn't realize like, and maybe it's my own gaslighting of myself. Where like I didn't realize that I like really needed that, even though I like, I'm on stage, I perform as part of my work. Like, and like I kind of have to be chosen to earn money in a lot of ways. And so it's, I don't know, it's like a very weird, circuitous thing, but a big one.
I'm just appreciating, there's several things I'm appreciating about this, which is like how you named all of the conditioning around this wound, I think, in a more macro way. But then almost how, with capitalism, sexism, racism, literally all of it, how that has informed this pattern on a macro level, but then how at a personal level, you claiming that you actually want that is so profound because like, that's how I'm seeing. I'm like, wow, you're like, it's like it takes a certain level of courage to be like, there's actually no problem here, and this is what my heart wants. Like, separate from the wounded, the wounding part and that patterning, there's actually like an exalted expression of this thing somehow. And that's what I'm like witnessing you stand in, both like as a performer and as a partner, and how like coming into this place of even like nearing acceptance and then nearing um like just standing in it, desiring it. Like, this is what I want. This is what I need. This is actually reparative. This is actually how I'm built, astrologically and all these other ways. So, yeah, there's
Yeah.
an empowered quality to the way that you're talking about the wound, which then makes it not a wound, an opening, like an
Mhm.
opening to move towards and design your life around and discern who you'll let in and who you won't. So it's a different approach.
Thank you for that reflection. Yeah, I like had written it down because I was like, whoa, this is like really big. And I think, I mean, yeah, they were happening in tandem. So yeah, the event was a couple weeks ago, and then the breath work was the following week. But somewhere in there, my current partner had like shared in a very public way. Like my friends were joking, they're like, "Oh, that was the hard launch of the relationship." It's like, I mean, we've been in a relationship for a while, but like, I'm pretty private, and I don't. I think I even told him like I don't really want you posting anything about me like on social media. And social media is such a funny space anyway. But yeah, it was like this very like sweet like yeah, demonstrative and like declarative, like this person, you know, like I feel so honored to like witness this person's beauty, this person, me. But I didn't realize until I saw that I was like, oh, I want, I like, this is the repair. Like, this is the alchemy of all of this. Like, he didn't have to do that. I didn't ask him to do that. We haven't even had a conversation about it. I just was like, oh my goodness, like yeah, this is the thing that I felt like had been missing, like maybe since, I don't know, third grade, I guess. Like very, I mean, quite significant, long time. Um, but yeah, it was really interesting to sit with that and to like, I guess even have like the nervous system to hold all of my squirming and cringing and just like, oh, I hope he deletes it, like, like all of it. But it's very sweet.
Oh, yeah. And I think the other thing I'm appreciating you're pointing to is like how sometimes the heart has a very nuanced way that it wants to be related to. And then it's like we don't even know it until it happens in that very specific way. And it's like, I needed that. Like, I wouldn't have even known to ask for it, but that hit. Like, that hit a very specific place of love and a specific expression of love that is like quenches something deep.
Yeah.
So, ah. And I think the other piece you're pointing to around having the nervous system to kind of hold the squirming is really also profound in that that's not something we talk a lot about. Like, I think there's a truth to that, that when we do start to receive some of those deeper longings, it's really quite common to kind of freak out about it and like have a lot of like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. It's like so like let's normalize that because that's a thing versus like, oh, good, now I get what I want and everything's good. It's like, that's not how life works. It's like, oftentimes we have the longing, then the thing comes in, we receive it, and we're like, oh my God, you know? So I'm curious actually to have you talk any more about that and what that experience was like and how you met it
Mhm.
where you are.
Yeah, I think so often in the meeting of edges and in expansion and even just growing into yeah, the desires and longings of my heart, whether that's in a creative project, whether that's in a vacation or like how I nest and build my home or creating a family or whatever it is. It's like so like there's a dialogue that I have to have, or I would say is an important part of the process with my own sense of deservingness or worthiness around it. And like I guess it speaks to what I had shared earlier about just maybe it's like the conditioning of being a middle child. Or I shouldn't generalize that. I don't really know why, but there's parts of me that are just like okay with like not getting the whole thing. Like always had to share my toys, always had to sit in the middle seat. Like I never got to sit in the front seat. Like it was just not an option. Just like it was not an option to ever not have a sibling in the house. Like I did not ever have my parents all to myself ever, whereas both of my sisters did. So like this idea of just like things kind of like being incomplete of what I really want is a very common experience for me. And I can tolerate a lot as a result. I can hold a lot of disappointment as a result. And I also often find that up until recently, I haven't really been asked within a relationship, like, what do I want? Like, not just like, what can I tolerate or like, what am I willing to deal with? Like, it's no, like, what is it that you want that so I can like try and meet you there? Which is a really different way of orienting in relationship. And so with your question of like the nervous system, I mean, fortunately, it's my job to like build a container and to build my capacity to hold a lot. I also think that I chose this, I chose this or this chose me so that I could do that. Um, And I find that in love, it's not enough. It's like I actually need to like do even more. I mean, we've had conversations outside of this conversation where I'm like how much practice like does one need to like to to be with the weather of relating. Um and yeah, I think that so often in my practice like particularly in mindfulness, and we could totally like offshoot and discuss this further, but this idea of, I was just reading about it this morning, like delusion, or like for me, it's less delusion and more like quote unquote detachment, where I kind of just sever my feelings about it. And it's like, okay, I'm in a really good place if I don't care if this thing happens or not. And so I don't even really like, I guess I say all of this to say is like, that doesn't really work because if you do get the thing that you want and you did not, and you weren't anticipating it, I should speak for myself. If I get the thing that I wanted and I wasn't anticipating it, I think the getting of the thing is the thing that stretches the container because it's like I couldn't hold it before because I couldn't hold it before. Like I think the getting it is the like, and that's where like the squirming, it's like the squirming is the stretching and the, you know,
Yeah.
making making the space bigger. Um, which then my other question is like, to what end? Like
Yeah. I do. I really appreciate that. you made me think about, I had a teacher that talked about like the near enemy, you know, that phrasing like the near enemy of equanimity, for example, is what you're describing of like, it's not quite non-attachment, it's like not caring, right? The not caring is the near enemy of equanimity because we are kept safe, but it's like also a subtle form of disempowerment. And I'm hearing you talk about like, staying in one sense of power so that, you can weather the ups and the downs and, that's like that equanimity. But, this question of like to what end is a really beautiful question, especially in the times when we're feeling like so stretched, like, okay, nervous system is activated. We are, in a rocky storm. And I was just thinking a lot recently actually about this idea of titrating and how it's so, I mean, at least for me, I do it in ways that I don't even realize. And sometimes it'll manifest as like, I'll be a little distracted. Like I'll be like right here relationally, but then I'll like need to talk about something else because the intimacy is too intense. But I'm not even like consciously aware that that's happening. But then I notice that I do the thing where I'm like, and so let's talk about this other topic. And so it's like, oh, my system's trying to titrate. I can back off a little bit. I don't have to like stay in the fire of the intensity because to your point, like there is a gauge and we can tip. We can totally tip into being like flooded or overwhelmed or beyond capacity. And that dysregulation is quite unpleasant as we have talked about. So
Thank you for talking about titration. And like, that is it's such a beautiful word. Um, I think of it like from like the chemistry, like the science of like, you're literally just like adding stuff to like dilute. And, um, and yeah, like we have a natural way of doing that. And my therapist talks about it a lot. And kind of this like little bit of exposure, like a little bit of like stretching. And I do wonder like sometimes like what is the best route, like particularly in a recent conflict that is like I notice myself like there's like two ways I could go about it. Um, and like, can I talk about it without like too many details? Because the details are actually not important, but it's like, okay, do I have the capacity to just like address the like surface level conflict, but then like the deeper conflict? And then it's like, okay, well, what can I actually expose myself to in this immediate conversation? What can we table, save for later? Like, and which one is the best, which is the not just the best, like what's the most loving to, to me, like if I'm centering myself, sovereignty. One of the ways that I think about that. It's like, okay, like there's a lot of feelings here. Like, what can I name them all? Like, what all of them are like associated with some different story that's like not necessarily what's happening. And yeah, it's like, yeah, what are we learning in those moments about ourself and our way of navigating? And yeah, like what you said about intimacy and like too much intimacy or like an intensity of intimacy, like that's real. And like it doesn't mean that you aren't willing or able or avoiding the intimacy. It's like yeah, there's like your window of tolerance. There's literally, yeah, being over activated, hyper arousal, and like just completely flat, like hypo arousal. And we can't really know because we don't really know what's, the trigger. What's the thing that feels like too much?
exactly. It feels like we're just like these very sophisticated vehicles that we have to learn how to drive without, stalling and without putting into burnout or combustion in some way. And, to your point about like these different levels of depth that one can go in a conversation, like I think it's really skillful to say, I can touch on this at a kind of high level right now. I don't have capacity to do a deep dive because I imagine that will take quite a bit of unpacking that I'm not prepared to get into right now. So, like, at the high level, here are the bits and know that, like, there's interest to double click, but like, not today. So I feel like I'm constantly having that negotiation internally and also like in partnership. So yeah, just appreciating that you brought that up. And um, so I'm curious to like hear, I know you have a depth mindfulness practice that's what you do for work and you teach it and also have your own practice with it. And so just from that lens, like what is it that, if relationships are a spiritual practice, which I believe they are, and I know we've talked quite a bit about this, so um, what is it that your heart, mind, body system is practicing with right now? And um, yeah, and like what are you learning about yourself and life in the process?
Hmm. Thank you for the question. Um, I do believe that relationships are a spiritual practice. They like have to be. Like, they because otherwise they would be transactional and like, yeah. Well, I know that like, I mean, and that's not to say like some transactional relationships serve a purpose. And there's a function, for all things. But yeah, I think that like, what am I learning? I'm learning a lot. I also think of relationships as art, like it's an art project, and it's like there's like me, and then there's like the other person, and then there's the third thing that has its own life that like we're kind of holding with our contributions and it like wants to do what it wants to do. And I think um I often think that it is in service of healing, which is like an important lens for me to have and hold because especially when I'm like in these moments of conflict or like tender heartedness or I mean tender heartedness doesn't just mean like heartache. Like I definitely have found myself like in a really tender space around like receiving love and that's also medicinal and in a lot of ways overwhelming for me because it's not been the pattern and history of how I've moved in relationships. So it can feel like a lot. And one of the things that I'm hmm, aware of, at least recently, is that I hope, well, I guess it feels still like an experiment. Like I'm like, I'm not sure because like this is so novel. I hope and think, and this is like what it feels like. But yeah, there is like this kind of miraculous way of my heart remaining open, even when I am like there's like parts of my body that still want to contract or close. The heart is like not the thing that's closing. It's like the heart is still expanding and it's almost like I don't even want to say it because it is true. The heart has its own intelligence and it's not actually operating the way that my brain operates. I would even argue that the heart is more intelligent than the brain and because my heart's open, it's like way more sensitive. And I have it's almost like I have to like be in a different conversation with my heart of like, oh, we can trust more. Um, and it's interesting because the brain is like, these things have happened before in this way. This is how it's going to happen. And that's not true. Like the brain can't know that actually. Like the brain is trying to, it's trying to protect me, but it's not, the brain is, it's a very interesting relationship. That's what I'm learning. Like I'm learning there's a very interesting thing happening. And I used to be so focused on like the brain and the body. I've spent like my whole life dedicated to like understanding the way that the brain talks to the body, completely not including the heart in that study. Um, and now I'm like very much in a study of the heart where I'm like, oh my God, my heart is just like open. Like everything is beautiful and painful. Okay, like that's what it means to have the heart open for me in this moment. And it's not closing. It's not like my body is like, okay, like brace yourself for this, but it's not, my heart is not hard. It's not like, yeah, it's still very open. Um, and because it's open, interesting things are happening in the heart. Like it tingles, it like feels gooey. It feels like it's actually like spreading, like there's a spreading quality. And it's like, I've never had these sensations before. What's happening?
Ah, I'm just so appreciating how you described that experience, like the way that the mind and the body might have a contraction, but that the heart can still have openness. The heart can still be open and not contract. And then, like, the possibilities that emerge from that place, but the unfamiliarity of it at the same time. And then it's like, okay, this is unfamiliar. And then as a human, of course, we start to make meaning and it's like, what is happening? But like the way you were talking about tenderness and how it's not just difficulty, like tender from heartbreak, it's like tender from feeling, tender from being human, tender from having an open heart and like being moved by life. And I feel like in a way, that's kind of how I hold like the heart of an artist, which you are. And so it's like the heart of an artist has that capacity to be so intimate with life that it's painful and joyful and it like splits us open. And it's like, that's where the art comes from. It's like it's coming from the willingness to be moved as a being. And yeah, I was getting chills as you were talking, just like so appreciating the depth of vulnerability and the willingness to just like meet life as it unfolds and to choose. And it sounds like now it's become, and you can tell me, I'm curious, like it sounds like it's less of a choice and more of just now my heart is open. But I know I've gone through periods where I've really had to choose to keep it open. So I'm curious where you are and how you're noticing your heart and like its openness.
Yeah. Um, that's a really, and like all your questions are so great. I mean, I was crying when I was reading them. And I was like, I'm not going to prepare too much. I'm just going to I'm not going to say which ones I want to answer. Like, I love the ones that you're asking. And I, I think it's both. I think that, my heart has already chosen, I guess, to remain open. I'm not like doing any kind of like practice around that, but I do know that the quality of the feeling is different than it was before. Like there was a period of time where I was actively working to keep my heart open, but I wasn't really in relationship. Like I mean I was, but it wasn't to this depth. And it also wasn't, well, one, I didn't know this depth existed. Like, I don't even know if that's true. It's like there's a knowing, right? Like I have to believe, or I don't have to, I choose to believe that there is like something that is kind of moving me in a particular direction, whether that's in service of my art or in service of my practice or in service of the collective. Um, and these are all things that are interesting to me. I think we all have them. It's like I've always been interested in contemplation and like like solitude. Like I definitely spent a lot of time as a kid by myself, thinking, writing, dancing, pondering. And I think all of that is, in service to whatever I'm doing right now, whatever's happening right now. Um, but I think that like there have been very significant periods in my life where I didn't have access to my heart. Whether it was through grief or, well, not necessarily different kinds of grief. I mean, I think we're kind of, I'm always in like a cycle of some aspect of grief. So it's not specific to a breakup or the loss of a parent or something like that. It's like there, there's just moments where like there's just like closure. It's like it is like nothing's getting in. It's like nothing's moving me, and those are very painful. Like the numbing, or like that's a painful place for me to be in. And I think something happened like a couple years ago where I was very, very much trying to keep the heart open, but it wasn't, it was almost like, I'm gonna use a running analogy. Like it's almost like I was like doing like a track workout, like very short distances to like run a marathon. It was like kind of like a teaser of some kind of cardio, but it wasn't like, and there was no endurance. Like it was just like there was like moments where I could like dip in and have like a meaningful connection with somebody and be totally loving and feel very open and spacious with them, but like it's still like the relational container wasn't like big enough to really be met with depth. And so there wasn't really a place for me to explore like how how open I could stay, I guess, if that makes sense.
It
Um,
does, yeah.
yeah, so it's like, okay, you do the track workout, maybe you can get like a mile or 2 miles, but like you don't know if you can do all 26. I don't know if I can do all 26 still, but like, yeah, I guess it's the question to what end. But I feel like,
Mm.
uh, yeah, I think she's open for a while.
Right, right. Like the capacity through the practice, you know, and now it sounds like it's just more organically the way the heart is responding. And I see you in that practice of like, okay, to what end? Like, how long will this last? And then, like, but also I think appreciating that, you know, the awareness of how painful it is when the heart closes, what it feels like when the heart closes, and then just the recognition and awareness, even of itself, starts to soften the experience over time. So it's like, okay, it's not like, oh, it's closed forever, like, lights off, but how painful that experience actually is. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another thought to that too, of
Oh, yeah.
like, to like, yeah, to how open will it stay? I mean, I think like so often when the heart has closed, for me, it's been because of like a long period or long window of like hopelessness or despair, or just like a believing that like something isn't loving or kind. Like I think like even if I were to experience heartbreak, and I do, like I think that there's grief in everyday life, especially like in the world that we live in currently. Um, and so yeah, the hopefulness is like love. I guess maybe what I'm trying to say in a very simple way is like I really do feel in my heart, not just thinking it, but I really do feel in my heart that love is an abundant resource, and like loving kindness is infinitely generous. And so it's like I have greater access to that, and not just through a relationship. It's through like many currents in life. And it's all kind of like, with the example that I showed at the beginning, it's all kind of happening simultaneously and congruently. So it's being like magnified for me in this moment. I don't know that I'll ever not believe that, because it's fact. It's like a very tangible thing I'm experiencing. I feel very held in love. Not just in like my art, but like in partnership and also in friendship and in like my community. It's in the trees. I live in the forest. The trees, I feel held in love by them. It's like it is literally all around me. And so I don't know if my heart can close. Like,
Ah,
I see
like,
it.
yeah, I see. I just, yeah, just deeply appreciating what you're sharing. And also, like, the thing you pointed to around grief being a daily, almost like a daily circuit of when the heart is just in contact with life, in intimacy with life, will have the like wow, awe, and like generativity, and like, everything you're talking about, friendships, romantic partnerships, nature, like all of it, work. And then the cycles of grief that and I'm curious how you experience this, but even just hearing you talk, it sparked like this notion that the more capacity we build to grieve on a frequent basis as grief arises, the more capacity we build to love and feel love on a frequent basis as love arises. And it's like the dance of those two things that are keeping the heart engaged with all of life as it is. So,
Hmm. You said that so beautifully. Yes.
yeah, thank you. Oh, so I think I have one more question because I know we're coming up on time. So I'm going to ask that the last question. Well, I might squeeze two in. We'll see. um, so the next one I was holding is in discovering, or yeah, as you're in this process of discovering your heart's desires and needs and longings, which one of them you talked about very out of the gate, right? This need or desire to be like chosen overtly and have that, feel honored in that way, feel claimed. um Imagine there's more, like, what lessons are you learning in discovering your heart's desires, needs, and longings in this moment?
Ooh. Um, what lessons am I learning? Hmm. I feel like there's like buckets. Bravery and courage and um, like a surrender slash trusting and um, and I don't know, like dignity, integrity, maybe. Like there's, yeah, there's definitely some themes in all of those categories. I'll just leave them there for now. Like, um, but I do feel like conditioning is interesting in that, like, okay, like that whole like it felt very circuitous to be like, okay, I was fed this story about being chosen, and then I like worked really hard to like not want that. But then when it does happen, it's like, oh, actually, no, I really do want that. And it's like very like innate in me. And I think that happens a lot for me. Like, I think that I kind of go in this like thing. Um, and I could say it's because I'm a Gemini and like sometimes I contradict myself. But it is kind of interesting to like, yeah, like also not really know what the desire is. Like it could be something different in the morning than it is in the evening. And like I am really sitting with my own contradictoriness, if that's even a word. Like it used to be something that I like felt a lot of shadow around. Like I was just like, like I'm not too like It's such a horrible thing to say. Like Geminis are two-faced. I don't know. I must have read that in like Teen Vogue as a kid, or like, Cosmo, like those magazines that like give you kind of like the worst characterizations of different signs. And I was like, no, that's not me at all. Like I'm like so like I try to be so transparent and clear, but it does require at least some courage and bravery for me to notice when I'm not necessarily like I can want two things that don't necessarily work together.
I think you're pointing to something that is so like insightful. It's like the the vulnerability in allowing paradox and to claim paradox is like that is real because our culture teaches us that we need to choose. It teaches us that it's either or, and to actually embrace the both and takes a lot of courage. So I'm just appreciating like the way you were talking about the themes of integrity and courage arising at the same time. It's like even just that of the willingness to hold paradox as one's truth. Like it's so counter to what we're taught, and it's so counter to how we're conditioned that it's like its own little revolution.
Yeah, but it is very hard. Well, it's very hard for me right now because I'm like, again, it goes back to like integrity and dignity. And it's like, I deeply know myself. Like, it's not like I'm not confused about things, but as I'm like saying them, I'm like, oh, I could see how this would come off as confusing or like, and then I'm like, no, I really just have to trust that like the third entity, whether that's the relationship or, I could use another example, like my creative partnership with my music partner, like the thing we create is a third thing. It's like, it's a thing that is actually being supported by our our talent, but also our psyche, like our emotional space, our creativity, and we're holding it, and we're allowing it to do whatever it wants to do. And sometimes what I'm contributing to it is contradictory, but I trust that the thing itself like knows, like it can, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I think like that's, yeah, like I have to hold it. I have to hold like my romantic relationship that way too, because yeah, I mean, who knows why I'm contradicting myself. It could be, that could be split in my desire, or it could actually just be that I desire different things at different times, and like that's okay too. Like,
Yeah.
or it could be an invitation to get more clear about like, okay, I want to be claimed, but not in the white supremacist hierarchical way. Like, I want to be claimed in a way where I am standing in my own power and declaring my love for self, and I'm just being met there. That's where the claiming is. It's not like ownership, it's not possession. It's like, okay, how do I get more clear about what it is that I'm saying that might sound like a paradox? I don't know.
Yes, like paradox as an invitation to get really intimate with the nuance of and clarity to get super crisp. It's like this, but in this way, this, but in that way, like with not with these parts. Like, and I think there's, yes, like that is a beautiful way to like hold paradox is this invitation into nuance and subtlety and like crispification. I don't even know if that's a word, but now it is.
I love, yeah.
Yeah. So, as we're coming up on our time, this is so rich. So many nuggets of wisdom in here. Is there any like one last bit of wisdom you'd like to impart on our listeners or share with our community?
One piece of wisdom. Hmm. We, yeah, we are all deserving and worthy of the desires of our heart. Um, I guess it's just as simple as that. And and I think that has taken me a very long time to embody it. Like I could I could really think about it. I could write about it, I could teach it, but I think like really letting it inhabit my body and show up in the way that I show up has been a really interesting um, experience as of late. Yeah, yeah. But but I see it like as I accept that and like feel into it and like exist in it, I see where it shows up in other ways. It's like it's like yeah, it's coming back to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm feeling so inspired and moved by our conversation. And I want to just ask where people can connect with you, learn about your work. And I'm going to post everything in the YouTube notes. But in terms of like if you have anything coming up that you want to share with our community.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, ways to be in practice with me in a regular capacity would be through the Compass or through Dreamwell. Both are kind of like digital spaces of practice, different offerings and different spaces, but very straightforward if that's of interest. The websites very clearly lay that out, and then for folks that are in the Bay Area, my music partner and I offer a music and mindfulness experience called Resonance, and that's once a month at Shack 15, which is at the Ferry Building. And we kind of like do other random things here and there, but those would be like the three ways to kind of engage like in a more consistent way. Um, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nkechi. This was beautiful. And I will pause our recording here. Thank you so much.